So hey, I have with me right here BritVsJapan.
Hi
How's it going?
guys. Yeah, it's been good.
Also named Matt. So Matt and Matt. BritVsJapan versus Matt vs Japan.
I was just going to say, we haven't talked about this before, but this is a complete coincidence. I actually went to choose your exact name when I made my YouTube account. I actually typed in Matt versus Japan, and it said this username has already been taken, and I was like,
Oh, and you didn't know about my channel at all?
no, I didn't know about you until you commented on my videos.
Oh, what? Okay,
Yeah.
that's good that you told the world that, because I'm pretty sure every single person thought that you were like inspired by my name,
Yeah, no, it was
including
complete
me. And
coincidence.
I was happy about that. I was like, "Wow, yeah, it was cool. I inspired this guy's username."
It was a complete coincidence, like honest to God.
Oh, well, that's cool. Kind of similar mind frame, because I mean,
Yeah,
I get a lot of comments about that. Like, wow, if you're trying to learn Japanese, why do you have your name as if you're trying to like win a fight or something? But
No, it's complete
cool.
coincidence.
Okay,
Yeah.
Good to know. Kind of sad that I didn't inspire you, but okay.
Sorry. Once
So
I saw your content, I got very inspired.
cool. Yeah, and I also want to just say too, before I guess we get started, that I think you did a super awesome thing by logging your journey, because like I didn't get on YouTube until I was already, I had some good results. And so, I mean, I know that, a lot of people do find my content really useful, but I think a lot of people saw your content and they just saw your growth, your rapid growth. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh wow, here it is, only 18 months, and you have the whole thing. So it really helps people become aware of the fact that this can happen in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
And that was like a real game changer for AJAT, because the only people who had the results kind of, they weren't here during the process. They only showed up after it was done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think there was also part of the fact that, because when I first started, I had a search around for like people that had done AJAT, and I couldn't find anything really. As far as I was concerned, the community was dead, and AJAT was just nothing. I was just like, oh, I found a really old website that talks about learning languages. I'll give it a try. So for me,
yeah, definitely.
yeah. So and part of me wanted to sort of kind of share what I was doing.
Yeah, because I feel the same way. I mean, I feel like the reason why that doesn't happen as much, and hasn't happened until kind of we showed up, was that like the language learning community is not, in general, they're not really on the same page with AJAT, right?
Yeah.
They're into grinding 6K decks and not actually immersing in Japanese media until you're already fluent, which makes no sense. And so, and so what happens is that when people, get red pilled, as I like to call it, and they wake up to AJAT, I mean, at first they go and try to tell the internet about it, and then they're like, no, dude, you're retarded, and then they quit.
Yeah.
But so then they get good, and then they realize like, well, there's no point in going back and talking to those other people because they don't get it. And so the people who actually have success, it's like they're just off in Japan, in Japanese land. They don't come
They're
back
doing the right thing.
they don't return to the village to share their findings usually.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is that it kind of appears on the surface that no one succeeds with AJAT. But I mean, that's just because the people who are succeeding aren't talking about it.
They've gone off to better things.
Yeah,
they just can't be asked to share it because they know no one's going to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, and so now that we're kind of changing the tides,
Yeah.
and there's more and more people now making their AJAT update videos and stuff to log their journey. And so I think once we have like 10 more of you, people who are like, here, 18 months, like I'm not perfect yet, but I'm no doubt fluent and I have never even been to Japan, then it's going to be pretty much practically impoble to deny that AJAT works incredibly.
It works, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to thank you for starting that trend.
That's all right. It was a complete accident. Honest to God, I didn't expect it to have any effect. Because for me, like the videos were kind of just sort of an output for me to sort of talk about the stuff that I was discovering, and also a way to track my own progress. Because I could, if I really, if I ever had a bad moment, I could look back at the video and see how bad I was, and then like not how bad I was, but what level I was at, and see how much I'd improved. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I wish I had done that. But awesome. Okay, so let's get into it. I watched all your videos back yesterday, and thought of some interesting things I might be able to ask you. So,
awesome.
So first, like, how did you get interested in learning Japanese?
I think to begin with, I just ended up watching J-vloggers on YouTube, and through that, I ended up actually getting interested into the culture. Like, because before I didn't know anything about Japan. I never thought about it. You'd hear it in the news every now and then, but it was just I wouldn't even know where it was on the map,
So wait, how'd you find those J-vloggers? Just surfing around YouTube?
Just surfing around YouTube. You know what YouTube's like. Crap just comes up, and you end up just clicking on something, And then through that, I sort of started getting interested in the culture. And at the same time, an old friend of mine from high school, a few months before, he got me into Fullmetal Alchemist. He was like, "Oh, anime is so good, bro!" Like, I didn't know anything about anime at this time either. And he was like, "You should watch out. You should watch this. You should watch this." So I started watching like some anime on the side, and I watched like Death Note. And I remember Death Note because I watched it as a kid before on TV. Actually, it was on British TV. but with subtitles. I think it was the film. And so, like, you know, I just started getting interested in it, and through the anime, I started getting interested in the music, because I don't know if you ever found this, but like the music just sounded really, well, the language just sounds beautiful, right? It's just a very,
yeah, totally.
It's a very, I don't know how to explain it. It just, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Totally.
And the music was just like, especially anime music, because obviously their voices are so.
Yeah. So then, how did you get from I want to learn Japanese to AJAP?
Well, all of that just kind of came together, and I was just like, I just finished college at that point. College in England is like the last 2 years of high school. It's like a separate school, but we call it, yeah. Anyway, so I just finished that. I finished an IT course. It was coming into the summer, and I was like, I'm a bit bored. I actually finished the course early, and I was like, you know, I'd like to do something. I'm really bored. I've got nothing to do. And I was, at the time, all this, I was interested in Japan. So I was like, oh, why not just learn Japanese? So I looked up, you know, how to learn Japanese in Google, and came across, there's hiragana, there's katakana, there's kanji, you know. So I started off learning hiragana and katakana using mnemonics, which it was pretty much a similar method to RTK. You could make a story, you could break down the components of the characters, and you build up a story. So I did that, and then I was around June 2015, I think. And around that point, I still didn't really know what to do. I just sort of was just, you know, poking around here and there.
Okay.
And I spent a good month, I think, researching like how to learn languages. Like you got Kaufman and like that Italian polyglot. I can't remember his name. Look, that's the one. Obviously Benny. And I was looking up all these different people, and I was just trying to get an idea, like, how can I actually do this, and how can I do it in a way that doesn't take up my entire life? How can I do it quickly, but also at a reasonable pace? Because obviously I saw Benny stuff, and I was like, this guy's lying. This guy's an idiot. Like, and so I was sort of like searching around for quite a long time, and then I don't know how I stumbled across it, but I just came across AJAP. Like
on Google, or?
Yeah, to be fair, it was probably a website link.
Mentioned on a forum or something?
Yeah, it was probably mentioned on a separate website saying, you know, AJAP says to do this, and then I end up clicking on it and just end up there. And so I sort of started reading some of the blog posts, and I was like, you know, this guy kind of knows what he's on about. And I've always had this thought that learning a language can be done just by listening to it. Like when I used to learn languages at school, and I used to do French, German, and Spanish, and I can't speak any of them. But
so, did that kind of intuitive sense of, you know, language acquisition come from your failures of learning French and Spanish?
I think so, yes. And I think it was because, like, I would be, you know, I'd just be sat there trying to look at verb tables, trying to like do all this crap, and I'd be like, surely if I just did what a native speaker would do, like a child would do, and listen to the language loads and loads and loads, wouldn't it just seep in? Like, wouldn't I just be able to speak it? Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, that's really interesting though, because most people don't come to that thought unless they're told.
Which really surprised me, because when I started talking to people about it, they were like, huh? And I'd be like, isn't it common sense? People were like, no, what are you on about? You've got to use a textbook. And you've got to, you know, do grammar conjugation, all this kind of stuff.
So. Of course the earth is flat. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So I think because I had that mindset in the past, I was much more open to the idea of AJAP.
Okay, cool. So yeah, most people need some kind of door into it before it will really click for them. But
I mean, I was still very wary of the site. Skeptical, yeah, because I looked up like AJAP reviews and stuff, and people were like, this guy's a scam artist, and you know, because obviously he tried, you know, making profit out of the website, which is fair enough, like people need to make money, but I think he did do, like, some of his products were way too expensive for what probably what they were worth. And I think a lot of people didn't like that. And when I saw that kind of stuff, I was like, this kind of looks a bit fishy, but it makes sense. But so I wasn't entirely sure. But anyway, I kept reading through the site, and I kept learning Japanese at the same time. I think at this point, I started doing sentences with a pre-made deck of Anki Web. I hadn't even done RTK at all. I just started doing it. And then I was getting through sentences, and I was like, I was doing quite a few a day, but I was really struggling because obviously if you don't have that stepping stone with RTK, you kind of can't. Well, it takes a lot longer to read a sentence, right?
Yeah. Wait, was there like grammar attached to the sentences, like explanations, or were you just like?
It was just Japanese sentence, and on the back it was the kana, and then it was the English translation. That was it.
Okay, that's pretty hardcore. Just like, don't care about grammar, just let my brain figure it out.
Yeah, I was just like, I literally, because I I was kind of lazy as well. So it's like, I don't want to learn grammar. I hated learning grammar in school. I don't want to learn grammar. Like, that was my point of view. So I was like, done. I'm not learning grammar. So I just tried playing through it, and I managed okay for a while, but it just got really tiring really quickly because, I didn't understand the grammar. I didn't understand the kanji. And it was just like, yeah.
So then you were more willing to give AJAT a try?
Yeah, so I at the time I was reading more posts, and then I was like, oh, maybe I should check what AJAT says about kanji and have a look at what he says to do with kanji. So I had a look, and yeah, he was saying to do RTK, and then I read about lazy kanji and ended up doing lazy kanji. And at the time, I was fine with that because I didn't. In case you guys don't know, lazy kanji it's RTK, but if you do lazy kanji, you're not going to end up writing by hand.
Yeah, it's kanji kanji on the front, and you just recall the meaning instead of having the meaning on the front, recalling the kanji. Yeah. And so you learn how to read them, but you're going to mix up probably the ones that look similar out of context, and you won't be able to recall them from memory.
Yeah. So I ended up doing that because at the time I was like, I don't care about writing by hand. Like, it just sounds crazy. Like, who can write 3,000 characters by hand? That's insane. So I just did the lazy way, and I ended up doing, like, on average, probably 30 a day, but sometimes I'd be doing like 100, and then the next day I did not.
Yeah.
So,
were you like coming up with stories, or were you kind of just grinding it?
As I was saying, at this point I was really lazy, so I used community stories
on the Kanji Kohi forums.
On the Kanji Kohi forums, yeah. Which it was faster.
Yeah, I mean, it's better, definitely better than nothing. Like,
it's better than nothing, yeah. But I don't recommend doing it because if you make your own, it just sticks better. Like, I had trouble even after they would mature. I could still sort of notice it being difficult to actually read Japanese because I would go through it and I'd be like, I can't remember what this character means, and So I definitely recommend actually making your own stories because I think it will stick better.
Yeah, another important thing, well, it's just my opinion, but visualizing the stories is really important because, one of the reasons why it's so powerful is because humans have really strong visual memories. Yeah. And so if you're going to make your own story, you're kind of going to visualize it whether you like it or not, like as you come up with it. But if you just read someone else's story, it's easy to just keep it at the level of like words.
That's true.
And so it's kind of like if you are diligent about visualizing the stories, you can do pretty good with the community
pretty
stories.
Much what I did, yeah.
Yeah, but it makes it really easy to be lazy because you just see the story there and then you want to move on to the next one. It's hard to stop and be actually like create a picture in your head.
Yeah, that's true. That is a good point because I can't remember what book I read it in, but I read it a few years back. That's a great memory technique is creating stories to memorize stuff, and the more crazy and more weird you make it, the easier it is to remember. So when you're making RTK stories, if you try and just make it as crazy as possible, then that's a good.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to make sense. Just
no, yeah. As long as in your head it's just weird, then it'll be good.
So when did you start the hardcore immersion?
At that point, I was already listening like all the time. So
was that like after you first read the AJAT site? And
when I first came into contact with the AJAT site, I'm pretty sure that's when I started having my headphones in and just listening most of the time. I wasn't at the stage where I was like listening all of the time, but it was the majority of my day. Like if I had to go downstairs for dinner, I would take them out, that kind of thing. But if I was upstairs in my room, or it was during the summer, so I was pretty much spending all my time in my room, so I would be listening all the time.
Okay, that's pretty interesting because most people, they need to really be sold on that idea that even if you're not paying attention to it, it might still be benefiting you.
Yeah, and for me, that never crossed my mind. Like, I actually remember very early on reading a post by Benny Lewis who actually said that passive listening doesn't have an effect at all. And I was like, this guy's stupid. Like, I don't know why. Like, that was just my opinion at the time. It makes no sense because I had nothing to base it on.
Yeah, but that's so interesting how you really did have this intuitive sense of language acquisition. Yeah. It does definitely sounds like your failures with being forced to do traditional methods with like German and Spanish actually did benefit you because it let you know what doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it's even besides that, it sounds like you really kind of got it just from the beginning, which is really interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. And the other thing was like I also had this thought like, oh, what's going to happen if I have?
Yeah, there is definitely that too. Like, it's not going to hurt.
It's not going to hurt. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I might get a headache. Oh no. Yeah. So there was that as well. So after about a month, basically when I found AJAT, then I started doing that. So about a month after starting learning Japanese, I started listening immersion.
So then after you did remembering the kanji, was that when you were pretty much like, okay, I guess I'm doing the AJAT method?
Yeah, at that point I was still reading the site and I was still sort of getting used to it and getting, like, I didn't read the entire site. If I went back and did it again, I'd make sure I would have read the entire site first. So at this point I still had lots of questions and lots of like I didn't really know how to do certain things, and I was like, I didn't really know where to go from here. So at that point, I just sort of switched back to doing sentences like I had before, and I just kept doing Japanese to English sentences.
That's really interesting, though, because that is an AJAT thing, but it sounds like you didn't get that from AJAT. You just came to you, too.
Just sort of ended up happening, yeah. Like, it was kind of strange. But at the same time, I was reading, like, honestly, I can't remember that period very well. So there's a good chance that I read AJAT, and I was like, oh, okay, I need to do 10,000 sentences now. And then I started doing it.
But the MCDs never interested you?
No, my opinion on that was, like, basically, I was like, I'm going to do what Cats did. Because, like,
fair enough, yeah.
So when I did start reading his posts about sentences, and then it said like at the top, MCD is the next best thing, or whatever it said. Click here to read about it. I clicked on it, I had to read, and I was like, but why? Like, you did sentences, so why do I need to do MCDs? If sentences got you to fluency, then I'm just going to do sentences.
I mean, I think it's it's even more the case with lazy kanji, where it's like, yeah, Katsu's telling you to do lazy kanji, but that's not how he learned the kanji. So,
yeah. I mean, I don't think I knew that when I first did it. To be honest, I don't know if I might have accidentally ended up doing kanji that way.
Yeah, I think there's like a pre-made, like the most common pre-made decks presented that way. So
yeah, there's a good chance I might have ended up but yeah, so I ended up doing sentences, and as I was saying, I was reading the blog at the time, so I was like, right, cool, 10,000 sentences, that's my goal. 10,000 hours of listening, that's great, that's my goal as well. I could just keep my headphones in all the time. And then that's when I started sort of, properly doing it.
Okay, I mean, in your videos, you talk about how at the beginning you were still taking classes, so that was really interesting to me, because it sounded like you would have known better before even starting.
As I say, I still hadn't read the entire site, and the philosophy hadn't really, I hadn't truly had belief in AJ yet. I was still sort of like, okay, I'm pretty sure this will work, kinda.
Yeah,
but I'm still wary of it. And I also thought, actually, I think I applied for those classes before because I had to apply for uni ages ago. When did I apply for uni? Christ, I can't remember. It was a good half a year before.
Okay, so it was kind of like, I'm already signed up, might as well.
Yeah, go. And I think they asked halfway through the summer, if you want to do language classes, then you're going to have to sign up soon. And I was like, oh, I'm learning Japanese now, let's do Japanese, It was just kind of an in the thing moment. I was like, oh, it could help. And then even if it doesn't help, I can just drop out. I don't have to do them. It was an extra. It wasn't towards my degree at that point.
Okay.
And consequently, I did them for 2 or 3 months, and I dropped out because it was just a waste of my time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought it was interesting how in your video you talk about how even when you first went to the classes, you already had experiences intuitively learning grammar. Like you said, I already know what the te form means. I don't need them to tell me and memorize all this crap. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting how even at that point you already had, I mean, obviously had making some gains the AJAT way.
I mean, it wasn't fully set, but it was enough that I could understand its meaning, if you know what I mean. I wouldn't necessarily be able to use it properly. Yeah, there was small pieces of grammar like the te form and stuff like that I knew.
Yeah. Well, it really sounds like a lot of the aspects of AJAT came really naturally to you, which is really interesting. And one of the biggest aspects of that is how, watching your videos, I get the impression that you were very comfortable with ambiguity from the start. Even if there was stuff all around you didn't understand, you felt, that was totally fine, didn't bother you or anything. And I think that's extremely crucial. So did that,
I think so too.
What was that like? Is that part of your intuitive understanding? Of course I'm not going to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expected it because, well, I mean, if you read the AJAT site, it tells you enough that, you're not going to be able to understand a lot for a long time. And you just need to keep going and just keep plodding on and keep giving the water some heat, and then you'll eventually boil. And for me, I was kind of if I ever thought to myself, oh, I still suck, I'm not making any progress, why can't I understand this yet? I just oh, hang on a minute, I've been doing it for a few months, you're crazy.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was going to ask you talk about it in your initial 6-month video, how you're having a total blast, and it is super fun.
Yeah.
And you do eventually reach that kind of golden point where you're not totally lost, but you can also make rapid gains because there's still enough you don't know. But until you got to that point, at the very beginning, when you literally understand almost nothing, how were you able to still make it so fun and engaging?
I mean, I'll be honest, there were a few times where it was really depressing. And I'll just quickly cover that first, because obviously that is an issue that I think a lot of people will go through.
Yeah. Well, I think just letting you know that that happens to the best of us is normalizing it is really important.
Yeah. I had a week where I just could not get out of my head why aren't you better? Why aren't you better? Why aren't you better? And I almost went insane. I swear to God, it was just.
Okay, good. That's really good to hear. I think that will make a lot of people relax a little bit about, or feel a little bit better about themselves, because I think everyone goes through that.
Yeah, I think everyone does. I think it doesn't help as well because you spend a lot of time alone, right?
Yeah.
That is, I mean, that's good because it means you can make so much progress, and like that is what you have to do it. Like you can't not. But it is difficult sometimes because you don't have many people to talk to about it because no one understands it for a start. Like
yeah, like, well, because one thing that I realized is that the biggest difference between a kid and an adult is used to being competent. Is being proficient in things that you do. Like most of the things we do, we're good at it. Like we walk, we go to school, we make food. It's like we're not used to sucking, and so once you're used to not sucking hurts extra bad. Whereas kids, the reason why they learn so fast is because sucking is normal to them, so they have no problem sucking when they pick up something new, And especially like if you're a baby, then you have no expectations at all to understand anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's kind of like that's the hard part. Is like you're going back to being a baby, but after having a taste of being an adult, that's a lot harder than it sounds.
That's very true. And I think the way to get over it is just to keep on. It's just to realize that you're not going to understand a lot for a long time, and just be okay with that. Learn to be okay with that, because if you're not okay with that, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, totally.
You just won't get there because it will just drive you insane. So yeah, and I think to make it more enjoyable, I think seeing my progress through RTK was great. Being able to do a certain amount of kanji a day, and then looking at every day I would look at the graph statistics on Anki, and I'd be like, yes. That green area is a little bit bigger, So I think that's great, and I think again,
seeing progress is really important for sure. Yeah.
And again, with sentences, that I would also check that stuff as well, and just the fact that even though I couldn't understand it, watching I got heavily into anime at this point, even if I didn't understand it, just seeing I had a few lessons from university, but the rest of the time I just sat at home, chilling out, eating chocolate and watching crap tons of anime. And it was great. It was I couldn't understand much, but for stuff like, Attack on Titan, you don't need to understand this.
Yeah. And anime definitely does have some kind of magic to it where it just makes you really psyched about what you're doing.
Yeah. There's just, I don't know. If you can find stuff this is what Katz talks about, right? If you can find stuff that is that interesting and that actually the content the enjoyment
strikes a chord with you, really.
Yeah. And it can cross the language barrier, then you're fine, basically. Just stick with that content and you'll make it. And as my passive input, actually, I used Sword Art Online. That was my favorite show back then. And I swear to God, I listened to that on repeat for months. At least 2 months, I would have thought, in the beginning stage. Just constantly. Obviously, I had other stuff that I was listening to as well, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting you bring that up, because one thing that I've been hearing a lot about, and I've actually been thinking a lot about, is that some people recommend at the beginning to choose one show or even just one movie and really just spam that over and over. And it's kind of like a springboard to get a real basis in the language, because if you listen to one thing, even if you have no foundation, you're going to get familiar with it. And once you're familiar with one thing, then that makes it a lot easier to get familiar with other things.
Yeah.
So you think that's a good strategy if you're a beginner?
I think it could, yeah. The only thing I noticed about it is obviously once you've sort of put that down and you start moving on to other content, you really do realize how much you miss out on. And it kind of made me think, was it worth it because I missed out on a lot of other language? There's only so much Japanese in Sword Art Online, right? Yeah. So it's I could have got a lot more and had a more rounded understanding, if that makes sense. Or
it's an interesting balance. Maybe people could try crazy things, make half of your immersion always the same show forever, and then be constantly swapping out the second half, on your immersion pod or something. Yeah, try something like that. That's what sounds interesting. That's what first popped into my head. But get the best of both.
Yeah.
So, in your videos, go ahead if you have anything else.
I was just going to say, having those mini goals and sort of, finishing RTK was great. That's great for motivation. Moving on to sentences, going from 100 to 200 to 300 to 500 to 750, and then that was great for motivation because you'd be like, yes, I can see that I'm making progress. Even if
totally.
I still couldn't understand anything, you could still see that you're making progress. So
yeah, focus on what you are doing, definitely.
Yeah.
So, like in your videos, you talk about how you have a pretty like obsessive and addictive personality, and you used to be like kind of addicted to video games and stuff. And from my point of view, that's like really ideal for an age outer. Like that's going to be a huge asset, you know, especially. And you also talk about how you weren't the most social person ever. So like that really sounds like, okay, if you're not like, you're okay with isolation and you can really get into one thing and get kind of obsessed with it and addicted to it. That's great for age at. So do you think that your kind of inherent personality or temperament like will predict your success with language learning to a certain degree?
I mean, I'd be lying if I said that being an introvert didn't help. But at the same time, I think if you're an extrovert, you can still do it. You just have to want it that much. And I think that's, I say, my addictive personality. I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I think it's less of, thinking about it, looking back on it now, I think it's less of being addicted to something and more of wanting to do that.
Yeah, thing. Like really caring about it.
Really caring about it, really wanting it, like, you know, which I think is the same thing, but
well, put it, yeah, it's just phrased from the other side, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like the reason why I said that is because it was video games, and video games get a bad, you know, rep. Like if you're addicted to video games, blah blah blah. So I always looked at it on a bad light. But that personality trait, I think, is, and why I say trait, I think everybody's got it in them. I think that's a real key to being able to really get stuff done. And I think anybody who has real success in life in a certain area will feel the exact same way towards that particular thing as you and I have with Japanese and I suppose most of the people watching this will. And I think if you don't have that feeling of I really, really want this, then I think it makes it very difficult to progress.
Yeah, but then why would you be doing it anyway? So.
Well, yeah, why would you be doing it anyway? That's true. But, you know, some people do that. They end up... You know, I don't understand why, but some people do it. They end up learning a language and they're like, you don't really care that much, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's a really good point for sure.
Yeah. Because I've been thinking about it a lot recently because, like, I've been thinking about, like, I wish I was like this towards software engineering. Because then I'd be an insane programmer by now.
Yeah, but it's interesting how you can want to want something, but not actually want it.
Yes, yeah.
Because I think about that too. Is a lot of people when they come and they're complaining like, "Hey, I want to learn Japanese, but I'm not motivated." How do you get motivated? It's like you're basically telling me I don't want it, but I think it would be good to want it. How do I how do I want what I want to want? Yeah. And it's kind of like, well, if you don't want it, then you don't want it. Yeah. So why do you like? Maybe you should stop tying yourself in a knot and just be honest with yourself a little bit.
Yeah. There's that. There's definitely that. And I think you can make yourself to want it. I think you probably can do that.
You can nudge yourself in the right direction for sure.
Yeah.
But you have to have that spark at the bottom. Yeah, like you can't artificially create the spark.
Yeah. No.
You can cultivate it, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I would say it definitely helped me because obviously it's going to be a lot easier to learn a language when you're spending all your time in your room watching TV shows anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny how you'd think that the social people would be the better at the language because language is a social, like inherently it's for communication. Communication is social, but really you think of it like when a baby's learning a language, most of the time he's not saying anything.
Exactly, yeah.
So when you're being social means participating, which actually means like being able to not participate and be okay, which means what being an introvert is actually ends up being such a huge asset. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, but on the same hand, if you're an extrovert and you really want it, then you'll get it done. It's the same with any other skill. Well, I say any other skill. There are plenty of skills where you have to have communication. But for example, my best mate from like primary school, he plays guitar and he spent most of his time, I would call him like professional now. He's in a band. He's insane. But he spent most of his time in his room by himself practicing. And that was the majority of his practice time. And he's an extrovert. Like he's extremely extroverted. So,
Yeah, that's a really great case study that you can. It is possible if you want it, you'll do it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it definitely does help. And
do you think it's kind of an acquired taste that you can learn to kind of appreciate more?
How do you mean,
like you can learn to appreciate the sense of just sitting and watching anime, but then once you start seeing your progress, kind of appreciate that. Putting in all these hours alone in my room, but it leads to the results. So.
Oh, I see. You can sort of. Like once you see the progress, you can be like, this is working, like that kind of thing.
I think progress will motivate you no matter what your personality is. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, once you start seeing progress as well, I think it your motivation tenfolds. Like you just get even more motivated to make more progress. So
cool. So yeah, on that note, so after you kind of got RTK under your belt and you started, getting out of the total noob stage, did you start sentence mining? Did you start taking the sentences from your environment?
So as far as I can remember, I continued doing Japanese to English sentences, with this deck off of AnkiWeb. I think it was the Core 2K or something, and I got to 750 sentences. And I said to myself, right, once I get to 750, I'm going to make the monolingual transition. And I got there, and it was pretty hard to begin with. I'll admit, I sort of ended up adding Japanese in English cards and doing Japanese cards as well, because I didn't feel like I was making any progress, just adding Japanese only ones. So I ended up kind of doing both, if that makes sense. And at this time, the amount of sentences I started adding dropped because, as I say, it was difficult to do the monolingual transition. Like going from reading Japanese with English as a helper to diving straight into Japanese was very difficult.
Yeah, like what did that look like? Making that transition, what did the process really look like?
It was a mess to begin with, honestly. I just ended up struggling for it, and I'm pretty sure I tried laddering for a bit. I would look up a word in the JJ dictionary and then get the definition for it, and then find any words in the definition I didn't know and look them up. And it was just a nightmare. I just couldn't do it. It was just too much. Like you'd end up laddering like 15 layers, and then you wouldn't know what the freaking actual flashcard was. I remember you saying about that earlier. And so I was like, I kept planning for it and doing it every day, and I was like, this has got to change. I've got to find a way of changing this up because it's not working. So by this point, I think I discovered Substress RS, and I started fiddling around with that. And I thought this could be a great resource if I just made loads of Anki decks and had loads of example sentences. Then, because these are all like all the shows that I guess you don't know what Substress RS is. It's a program that converts TV shows with subtitles. If you put the TV show in and you put the subtitles in, it will generate an Anki deck for it, and you can have like the expression on the front with an image, and audio. Well, I have the audio on the back of mine, and you can have like any definitions on the back, right? So I was like, right, of all the shows that I've watched so far, I'm going to make Anki decks out of them. I'm going to put them into Anki, and I'm going to have loads of example sentences. Then if I have a word that I don't know, I can try and find an example sentence for it, and then sort of try and understand it from contextual point of view, if that makes sense. So like if someone says, I hurt my leg, then you could sort of understand it from that, if you know what I mean.
So you used this example bank to help you make the monolingual transition, like when you look up a word in the Japanese dictionary, and then you'd look up the words in that definition, you'd stick them into your bank.
Yeah, so I'd stick them into the Anki browser thing, find an example sentence for them. I'd be like, this is easy enough. This is IPass 1 or whatever. I understand what this means. I'm going to add this into my deck. And then I'd learn that sentence first, and then I go back to learn the original sentence later on.
So does that mean that when you were actually making the transition, you weren't relying on English at all? You were still able to be totally Japanese, just you had the context from the shows to help you? Yeah,
pretty much. Occasionally I did cheat, and I was like, I need to look this up in English because I just don't get it. But from then on, I didn't add any English to my cards. In fact, I started deleting the English from my previous cards as well, because I was like, no English.
Nice. Hey, well, that's a really interesting strategy. Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea.
It worked pretty well. And I've been doing that ever since, because it worked out as a really good resource. Like, if I ever had a word that was like, I kind of thought I knew what the meaning was, then I could just get 15 example sentences straight away with audio and with, a context. Like, I could remember what the scene was and how it was used in that scene, or what the conversation was about. And then I could therefore get a sort of understanding of the use of the word, if that makes sense, or the nuance of the word.
So then after you made the monolingual transition, were you kind of taking the strategy of you'd find the words you wanted to learn, and then you'd stick them into your example bank and then find one from there?
Yeah, pretty much. That one? Yeah.
And so how many a day of those were you doing throughout the process?
It depended on the day. And because of the way I'd set this up, it was really easy to add cards. So if I wanted to, I could add 50 at a time. And there were days that I did do that because, as I was saying earlier, I didn't know anybody else in the community at this time. It wasn't until I posted my 6-month video that I started, got into contact with you and other people. And I just went off of what Kat said on his site, and I'm pretty sure he says on his 10,000 sentences blog post, you could aim for 50 a day. Yeah. So I was like, right, I got to aim for 50 a day. And that was my goal. And so I was just trying to do as many as I could every day.
Wasn't that a lot of reviews?
It was a lot. Yeah, I had days where I would have 600 reviews. It was insane. But because I was at uni and it was the first year and it was all really easy, I had so much free time, and I'd be doing it on the bus. I'd be doing it when I was walking. any free period, I'd be on my phone, like, anking away. And then as soon as I finished my reps, I'd start reading, like, trying to read a manga, but I'd be terrible. I still couldn't understand much by then. So
Yeah. Well, that's crazy. You really did that much because I was doing like between 10 and 20 sentences a day the whole time.
When I heard you you were saying you did 10 to 20, I was like, damn, why am I doing so much? So yeah.
So like, how many hours a day do you think you spent on Anki total, like adding and reviewing and everything, like on average?
It depends. It depends on the time. It depends on the day, and it depends on what level I was at. But probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I would have thought.
Okay, so that's not that bad if you're.
No, I mean, I time boxed like crap because I had issues at the beginning when the reviews started getting really bad. So it started getting to like in the 200s, and I was like, how am I going to manage this? Like, I have no time to do this many reviews. And that's when I started using time boxing, because I'd read about it before on AJAP, but I'd never actually implemented it. And that really helped. That really helped reduce it down. Like, I don't know if I really took as much in. I probably did
reviews
a lot faster, and I probably read the sentences probably too fast, if that makes sense sometimes.
Yeah.
But
that was probably a good trade, because I mean, like, even if each one is a little bit lower quality, but you have
the
total quantity be so much more.
Yeah.
It got to be a better, because it's like, it goes back to the ambiguity thing where it's like for me, I know one of my weaknesses is my OCD, and I try to perfectly ingrain each sentence, but I know technically that if I just was a lot looser and just flipped through them, but then did way more total, that would give me a way better final result.
Yeah. Basically ended up doing that. Yeah.
So did you ever actually take like the sentences from your immersion environment, or were they mostly like you got the word from their environment, but then you'd go to the bank?
Well, at this point, I was pretty much using, like, my bank was all the stuff that I was watching. So I would have stuff, most of the stuff that was in there was stuff that I'd already watched or that I was going to watch. And I was just using anime. So if I'd have...
Oh, so you kind of got the best of both worlds, basically.
Yeah, so like if I was watching Sword Art Online, I'd already made the deck for it, so it was in Anki. So if I found a word that I didn't know, or like I wanted to learn a sentence, I'd be like, oh, I'll just put that into Anki, find the sentence, and just chuck it straight into my deck, like, But there was, I still added stuff from like reading manga and reading websites and stuff. But the majority of my input at that point was from anime and from like JP subs. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So was there a point in the process where you started to immerse not just with what was fun, but more with like what you thought was going to help you? Like, I know you mentioned that you try not to listen to music as much because it's not as good practice.
Yeah, I mean, I still use music just because not necessarily as a form of, like, I just like it, like, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
But it's not. I don't see it as a useful. It's just the language isn't anywhere near as good as what you could be getting out of a light novel,
Yeah. Like, how do you think you balance between doing what would be most optimal and doing what's most fun?
I mean, back during that time, I was very much like, I just need to get better and better. So I'm going to read, anything that's going to make my Japanese better. So light novels or, anything that had decent Japanese. So that makes sense. Like high quality Japanese. Like I even considered like speaking to native speakers like a bad thing because it's just daily conversation. Like I was like, I can get more daily conversation out of a book, So I kind of just went. I mean, at that time as well, I pretty much just read what I enjoyed doing. And I also read some stuff to do with my course as well, Japanese. So like if I was learning about where to learn Java as a programming language. So I just researched it in Japanese, like how to learn Java in Japanese. I pretty much just did that. I mean, it's got to the point now where I'm starting to like expand a bit more and be like, I've noticed I've got gaps in my Japanese. Like I don't know much about food and I don't know much about like other areas, like the culture as well. Like there's just so much of the culture that I don't know about. So it's like, I'm gonna have to start buying books related to that and watch media,
Yeah, eventually, once you get to the point where your Japanese is like, well, once you have a foundation and you can see, okay, it's almost all here except for these holes, then you can go and start plugging the holes.
Yeah.
But yeah, until you actually get to that point where you're just trying to build a foundation, then it's, for the most part, it's you can do what you want.
I think that's how I treat the foundation. Like I just did what I liked, and then it just sort of
like anime is as good as anything else. So
I mean, they speak slightly slower in anime. That's one thing I did notice because I used anime a lot for like a good, I don't know, almost a year before I actually used any other content really. So when I started listening to podcasts, I was like, wow, they speak a bit faster.
Yeah, well, it's not just that, but it's also like anime voice actors speak so clearly and they enunciate.
Yes, there's that as well. Yeah, that is true. Yeah. I really struggled with like old men. And
Yeah,
like,
I still do. So
yeah, I don't know what it is. They just mumble. But it's just, yeah. And I was like, maybe anime is not going to be, not going to solve all my problems. So I started sort of moving away from it and started watching more TV and podcasts and stuff like that. So
cool.
yeah.
And when you were like throughout the process, how often were you looking stuff up like in the wild? Would you stop and look stuff up, or would you just mark it down and keep on going till later?
So I get this question a lot. Like a lot of people ask me this, and honestly, it was just like random. It would depend on the day, how I felt. If I was like, oh, I just want to read this manga, I don't want to actually, do any work. I just want to try and read it. Then I would just sit there and read it, and I wouldn't add anything. Even if I saw a sentence that I would think, oh, God, this would be good to put into Anki, I was like, no, just keep reading. And then other days, I would just do it normally. I would just be reading along, and then, oh, this word that's come up before, I think I know what that means. I'm going to put the sentence in Anki and learn it. And so it pretty much depended on how I felt that day.
Cool.
And I don't think it really matters. Like, some people go really hardcore choosing every single word, like picking every single word up. And like, I have to learn every single word. And I think that's great, but that will tire you out.
Exactly, yeah.
And at the same time, if you do take the opposite approach and you don't add anything, then you're still make progress, but you'll just make progress really slowly.
Yeah. So all about balance, I guess, right?
Yeah, you got to have a good in between. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So then moving on, like down your process. So in your 1 year progress video, you talk about how you were already understanding a lot of stuff, and it seems like around there, maybe like what was it like when you first started outputting?
Well, so I started outputting. I think it was around then. It might have been a little bit after. I can't entirely remember, but I started outputting way too early for a start. That's one thing I'm going to say to everybody. You just don't wait a bit longer. What would you recommend? Like a year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely depends on. It will depend on the person and what you use to immerse. But yeah, I would probably around 2. I've said in my timeline 2 years.
Oh, there you go. 2
Although
years.
that sounds like a long time, but yeah.
And I mean, one of the reasons why I started outputting earlier was because I met a girl, and we up until this point we mainly spoke in English. Like, her English was okay. In case you guys don't know, she's now my girlfriend. So, but we ended up speaking more and more. And as I sort of started learning more Japanese, I kind of wanted to, impress her slightly and sort of talk to her in her own language, And so I started using phrases that I knew were correct and sort of trying to I would never try and construct a sentence, if that makes sense. I would just be like, right, I'm pretty sure I know that this is right, so I'll say this. And if I didn't know, then I would try and check it first, if that makes, Google it, for example, check that it's correct before.
So even though you were able to do that and be so safe, you still recommend that you wish you would have waited, like you wish you would have waited longer?
Yeah, because I still had times where I would end up saying stuff that I didn't check. And then there's a chance that I could have made a mistake, and then that could, would end up affecting my Japanese. And like, we speak every day now, like on Skype, and I make mistakes, and she will be like, "That's wrong. What are you talking about?" And I think if I just waited a lot longer, then I think that wouldn't happen as often. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think of it as when you're outputting and like a lot, and your output is like you're at the level where you're being understood and you're communicating successfully, it kind of shuts down the flow of your brain learning from input as much, because it kind of feels like the job's getting done in a way. It kind of it's like if there's something and you always say it the same way because you have a habit, and even if that thing's kind of unnatural, it's less likely that you're going to notice the right way when you hear it, because you've already made the habit out of saying it this one way.
Yeah, that's true. I think you're slightly safer when you've got someone that you know really well, and they will like really, they will tell you when you're wrong every time. Like, I think that's okay, but still, you don't want to be in that situation in the first place. Like, you want to have a good, solid, solidified base first before you start.
Yeah. So you think that the good old advice, if you want to get good, get a girlfriend or a boyfriend speaks the language, may not be the best advice?
It's not the best advice, no. I mean, to be fair, what we would do is she would speak in Japanese and I would speak in English. So we would have
that's pretty good.
Yeah. So we ended up doing that for a very long time, and that kind of, that saved my ass quite a bit, I think. Yeah, but now I don't know. I can't really remember what her English was like to begin with, to be honest. But she doesn't speak very well. I don't want to sound rude in case she does ever see this, but yeah. So we're now speaking like pretty much entirely Japanese. And if I ever say anything in English, she'll be like, "I can't understand what you're saying. Stop it." So
Cool. Well, now at the stage in the process you're at now, that could be pretty useful.
I think it is starting to get useful, and she's at the point where, as I say, like she will start telling me if I'm wrong, and I've had times where she's got pretty angry with me
For being wrong.
Yeah, for being wrong. So yeah.
Cool. Do you have experience where like you're trying to say something and you don't really know how to say it, but then later on when you're immersing, it comes up, and then you're like, oh, that was it, and then next time it's not hard.
Yeah,
it's right there.
Yeah, that's happened a lot. Yeah,
I feel like that's the real benefit of outputting. It's like you don't actually learn from outputting, but through outputting you learn more from your input.
Yes, that's true. You notice more because you start sort of seeing the holes where, like, or you start noticing the things that you want to say but you can't say, and then obviously when that does come up in your immersion environment, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, like as you just said. So yeah, I think you're definitely right there. It makes you notice more, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so now getting on towards the end of your initial 18-month period. So it kind of, I think a lot of people when they first start learning Japanese, including me, they think of fluency as this like on or off switch where it's like you're not fluent, and then one day around the 18-month mark, flip will go on and now you're fluent. And even in your 18-month video, you kind of are talking as if that's the case, and okay, now you are fluent, the switch has been flipped on. So what are your kind of thoughts on that now?
Yeah, at the time I was going through a very cocky phase, and so I basically, up until like a couple of months before, right, I was sort of thinking like, oh, okay, I must be nearing fluency because Kat says 18 months fluency. So as I got closer and closer, I started thinking, right, is this really what fluency is? Like, I could understand most stuff. Like, I could understand a lot of like pretty much TV, anime, podcasts. I could understand the majority of it, and I could speak to a certain degree. So I was like, okay, is this fluency? And then sort of I was looking up what fluency was and like what different people's opinions on fluency was. And then I ended up settling on Steve Kaufman's definition because I was like, I need an answer.
And what was that definition?
I can't remember entirely, but it was something like, if you can speak to a native and have a meaningful conversation, even if you have mistakes, even if there's some things that you can't say, but you can work around that and you can still talk, then that's fluent. But even that has different levels, right? Even that has different levels. Yeah. So at the time I was like, well, I can do that. I'm fluent. But now I've looked back on it, I'm like, well, fluency is something that's very difficult, very difficult to define because, well, for a start, everybody has a different definition. And it's like, it's not something that's easy to define because there's so many factors that affect it, right?
And well, I mean, I feel like it's this kind of delusion that, because basically the way I think about it is that with any skill in life, it's a complete gradient, right? Like if you take piano playing abilities, there's a gradient from people who started taking piano lessons yesterday to the top best piano players in the world. Yeah. And there's no levels or anything. It's just, there's better and better and better and better.
Yeah.
And so it's like the same thing with language ability, but then we artificially draw some lines from where we say, like, okay, if you're past this line, then you beat the game. And if you haven't, you haven't yet.
Yeah. And that's what I've realized recently is like, actually, fluency isn't a thing. It doesn't exist. Like, it's just a word that we've made up to define a certain level. But even then, no one knows what that level is because everybody has different definitions. So it's kind of meaningless. Like, yeah.
So what's your view of your own ability now?
Well, right now, I would say, to be honest, I haven't changed much from that point in time. I've improved, definitely. But because I don't know if most people know about this, but as soon as I got to that point, I got to the 18-month period, I started learning German.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I started basically at the time period. At that time, we had to start applying for jobs for the next year. It was like we have this sandwich year, so we work in the industry for a year through the university. I didn't really want to do it. My plan was to either do it in Japan or study abroad in Japan. And as I got closer to that, I ended up realizing that actually my university won't let me do that. They have no ties with Japan and they wouldn't let me do it. So I was like, okay, this kind of sucks. What shall I do? And then after a few weeks, a lady came in giving us a presentation about how we could study abroad in Europe. So I was like, why don't I just learn German? Learn a new language. I'm already great at learning languages, but why not? And yeah, I was very delusional.
In what way?
Well, I end up thinking that I could just learn German because German's supposed to be easier, right?
Well, compared to Japanese, for an English speaker, I'm sure.
So I was like, oh, well, German's going to be easy, so I can learn that in 6 months, 9 months, which is insane, right? And then I was like, if I get to a decent level before I get there, then it'll be great. I could get so fluent in German, and I can come back to Japanese later, and it'd be great.
Wait, so at that time, you still did think of your Japanese as a work in progress?
Yeah. Which is like I did, but I didn't care. I got to the point where I was like, oh, if I just come back to it, it will still be at the same level, so it's fine. I can just improve it later on. So it was weird because looking back on it now, if I could go back in time, I'd slap myself in the face and say, what are you doing? Stop it. Your Japanese needs improvement. Stop. So yeah, and that had a massive effect on my Japanese, to be honest, taking that amount of time off.
How long were you working on German before you decided to...
I started in January. Before I uploaded that video, I started about a week before, I think. And when did I stop? Because I booked tickets to go to Japan to go see my girlfriend. And that was in August. The trip was in August for a month. So I got to Japan, and that was pretty much when my German immersion kind of stopped. And then, I kept doing it, but I just didn't do as much. And then, pretty much a month later, what happened is a month later, I was supposed to go back home, right? And what I was going to do is I was going to go back to England, and then a week later, I'd get a flight to Germany. And a typhoon hit Japan, and my flights got cancelled. I didn't have enough money to get back home. I couldn't claim off the flights because one of them had only one of them had been cancelled. The one from Hokkaido to Tokyo, and the one from Tokyo to Italy still went. So I couldn't actually claim.
That sucks.
Yeah, so it was shit. So I got £100 back, and that was it. And the flights were like 600. So yeah, that was terrible. I had no money, and I was like, crap, what am I going to do? So I had to wait for a month and a half to book another flight because it was the cheapest flight that I could get. By this time, I was too late. I was meant to go to Germany like a month before, right? And
so you missed that.
I missed the registration, and I basically couldn't go. And I had no money to book another flight there. Like, I was that broke. So I was just like, fuck it. I'm not going to go to Germany. And to be fair, I was actually really kind of relieved. And it was a real shock to me because I was like, why have I been wasting this much time learning German when in reality I didn't really want to go? Like,
is it like that kind of thing they say where it's like if you can't decide on two things, flip a coin, and before you try to look and say what side are you hoping it's going to be? Are you hoping it's going to be head or tail? It kind of sounds like it's like as soon as it got canceled and you realized that you're glad it got canceled. It was like, oh shit, I didn't even...
half of it was I could spend more time with my girlfriend. Like, that was, a huge factor. But the other half was like, I was pretty scared about going there, and because I didn't know enough German at that point, and I would have been screwed. Like, honestly, the entire course was in German. Like, all the lectures were in German, and this was high-end software engineering. Like, it wasn't German lessons; it was proper maths, programming. Like, and I was like, I can't do this. I will not be able to do it. So yeah, it was.
I mean, did you enjoy learning German? Like, were you able to replicate the process with Japanese?
Like, I couldn't get that same feeling with German as I could with Japanese.
Why do you think that was?
Do you know what? I don't know. I think a lot of it was there was no mystery to German. There's no it's too similar to English. Japanese is like, you got the kanji, right?
Yeah. Like,
kanji alone is just so exhilarating. Like, when you see a new kanji, it's like, oh my god, like.
You just found some treasure, yeah.
Yeah, you just found a little piece of treasure. Like, there was just none of that, and like sentences were boring because you didn't have you just be reading a sentence, and then like there's no back end. There's no like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, do you think all of that was because German is similar to English, or do you think it was because part of it was just you've already been through the process with Japanese?
I think that possibly might be a factor as well as the fact that I've already gone through it with Japanese, and I'd already reached a decent level of Japanese, and I was good at, and I could maintain, like, I could learn more, I could feel progress, right? And going back to the beginning stages in German and starting again as a beginner was a big shock. It was like, going back to knowing nothing when you've been
yeah.
When you've been,
we were talking about before, once you've had a taste of not sucking, tastes extra bad.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. And so I did a listening immersion all the way through those 9 months, but I didn't read much. I struggled finding content as well that was interesting. Their TV isn't that great, to be honest. In fact, most of their content is like dub Western shows, or they just watch English shows. So they really don't like the content wasn't great. Like, so I never really found anything that was interesting. I actually ended up watching a lot of anime over and over again, but in German dubbed. Like, and it just wasn't. It wasn't the same. It's just not. Yeah.
So then, once you went back to Japanese, what had your level dropped, or
Yes.
what was it like?
It had dropped. To be fair, like through this point, I was still talking to my girlfriend each day, right, whilst learning German, and I was still doing my Anki reps for Japanese, right. But other than that, I wasn't listening, I wasn't reading, I wasn't watching
At all.
At all. No. I might have watched a show like once a week, but that'd be it, like 20 minutes. That's it. And of course, I don't know if you have this same thought, but like just having a general conversation, like a day-to-day conversation with a native speaker, isn't that a high quality? Like the input isn't that high. Like
yeah, totally.
The quality of input isn't that good. It's just
that's why people who have parent, like for example, if you're a Japanese person who grows up in the US and you speak Japanese to your parents, you still suck at Japanese because you talk about such a limited amount of topics and it's normally really basic everyday stuff. It's just the same couple stuff over and over.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that actually, because I had 2 Indian friends from uni, and one of them said that he could speak. I don't know what language it is, but it was one of those languages that the Indians speak.
Yeah, one of those languages.
The other guy speaks it fluently, like he properly speaks it, and he kept saying that no, he can't speak it, and he's like, yeah, I can speak to my parents, like, you know, but he only spoke to his parents, like, and that was like once a week for an hour on the phone. He said he couldn't read the language, you know, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think you're definitely right there. That's it's the same thing. So yeah, as I was saying, like, so that was my input pretty much. So my reading level was pretty much stayed the same because I was still doing Anki. I mean, it probably dropped a bit, but I was still doing Anki, so I was still seeing, still seeing the majority, like at least the common words and phrases, right? So I don't think my reading dropped, although I have got really slow reading. Like it's a lot. Like I'm very slow reading now, and I'm trying to improve that.
What about listening?
And listening, that was probably where the biggest shock was for me, because I had moments, like I could still understand most of it, but I have moments now where I'm like, we were saying when I was talking to you earlier about it, I was watching The Crown dubbed in Japanese the other day, and Winston Churchill does a speech, and I know all the words in that speech, and I know that kanji, and I know they're in my Anki deck, and I know them, they're mature, but for some reason, like a lot of those words I couldn't pick up. Like I was listening to it and I was like, I didn't get entirely what he meant. And so that was a shock, because I was like, damn. I was like, yeah.
So as soon as you quit German and came back to Japanese, were you like, okay, let's go hardcore?
Not initially, no, because I was still sort of really butthurt about German. And then getting back into Japanese and having that shock of like, oh, actually, you know, my levels dropped. That also didn't help. And I was back into it. I was back doing HAT, and I was doing immersion a lot more than I did with German. I was listening and I was doing my reps and I was reading stuff, but I wasn't reading as much. That was one big issue, and that's something that I'm doing more now. And yeah, I didn't care as much. Like I got really lazy, and I stopped adding. Like I didn't add as much stuff to Anki. I just did my reps each day, and then sometimes I'd forget my reps. I wouldn't do my reps a day, like every now and then, and I got pretty lazy. And
I can relate to that. After I made that 3-hour video, that's how I felt for like 6 months to a year. Yeah,
it's just like sort of. I didn't lose interest, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It just ended up like that. So recently I've sort of been like, right, come on, you've got this crap that you still don't know. Like there's so many holes you have that you need to fix, and that, as I was saying that, when I was watching that show the other day and I didn't quite get that was a big eye opener, because I know like the speech, it was very specific. It's probably very specific vocabulary, and it's very old vocabulary, and it's not stuff that you would normally hear in everyday speech. And I think that's kind of why. Like, because I was so used to that kind of speech, and I was fine with just spending every day watching TV and watching anime, and you know, I have a 99% plus comprehension rate, and then every now and then you'll have a phrase or a show that is particularly hard, and it'll be like, damn, I still got some work to do.
Yeah, it's easy to get complacent.
Yeah,
you kind of have to go out of your way to remind yourself that there's still a lot more to do.
Yeah, like if you that was something that I thought about ages ago. It's like a lot of people like watch Dragon Ball and stuff and like One Piece, and like they get stuck and they just keep watching that, and that's great because you will improve. But I don't know if you've ever watched One Piece, but the vocabulary in it is terrible. Like it's
any shonen show is about
yeah. Like it's the same phrases over and over again. There's nothing to it. You're not going to learn much, basically. So if you stay in that pool of if you
I
stay in
plus
that,
zero.
yeah, if you stay in that level where there's no I+1, and you're not going to make any progress, and that's just it. And it's very easy to get stuck in that pool sometimes because you don't.
Yeah, well, once you're
so
used to actually understanding something, going and putting yourself in a place where you don't understand doesn't feel good. We're going back to feeling like you suck.
Yeah, there's that as well. Yeah.
So what are your plans for from here on out?
Plans from here on out, pretty much just trying to look into these areas where I don't know much about. So as I was saying earlier, one of the biggest things is food. That is incredibly important.
Yeah, that's my weakness as well.
Like, yeah, if you watch Japanese TV, like when I was in Japan, like half of Japanese TV is just food shows, and I was just like, this is crazy. Like I can follow along with it. I know what they're doing, but like I don't know what they're putting in there. I don't know what they're making. Like. So
yeah, for me, it's like I imagine I'm someone from the 18th century who's like walking to an Apple store and they're talking about all this like internet and stuff that I have no idea. Like when I hear people talk about food, I feel like a little kid and there's adults talking over my head.
Yeah.
It's like exactly what it's so intricate and detailed, and I've never thought about food that much.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I don't know what America's like, but over here, like our food culture is like nothing compared to Japan. It's just,
oh yeah, definitely. Like what I kind of realize is that because when it comes to food, there's likes and dislikes, right? Like some people maybe because a lot of what you like has to do with what you're familiar with. So if you grew up eating like I don't know African food or something, maybe Japanese food won't appeal to you. Yeah. But the thing is that Japanese food is better at being Japanese food than American food is at being American food.
Yeah.
It's like even if you don't like it, that's one thing. But it's kind of like how maybe say hypothetically, maybe like the best basketball player is better at basketball than like the best hockey players at hockey. Right? It's like you can't directly compare them, but you can compare them within their own field.
Yeah.
And Japanese food is so developed and nuanced, and it's like. They've been honing their skills, passing it on to the next generation, honing their skills for so long where, like, their tongues are so subtle compared to... Like, there's a word in Japanese, shita ga koeteiru, which basically means your tongue is fat. Literally.
Never heard that one.
And what it means is that, your taste is refined. And so, I mean, I feel like it's a double-edged sword because I can go get $10 sushi. I think it's good. Whereas to a Japanese person, that would be like torture.
Yeah.
So it's harder to please yourself. But I feel like when you do get pleased, it's like a heavenly experience to them because they actually appreciate it. Whereas for me, I can't tell the difference between $10 sushi and $100 sushi.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that was a little tangent. But like, so what are your long-term goals? Like in terms of Japanese and like, do you ever plan on picking up another language?
Probably not taking. I don't think I could take up another language now. Like, I don't know. If I did, I'd have to really, really want it. Like seriously, like
Yeah, not just for the sake of being trilingual.
Yeah. Not just for the sake of it. Like, and not just because. Like on a whim, like I can study abroad or something like that. I would have to want it because I want it, not
think it would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about long-term goals for Japanese?
For Japanese, I'm gonna say just continuing to improve, which is a very vague. Vague way of putting it.
I mean, once you start viewing it as a process and you realize like you're probably going to be doing this for the rest of your life. So
yeah, exactly.
It's like, always.
I mean, like from the word go, I've never thought about reaching a native level. Like you're aiming for like, perfection. And for me, I don't know if I'll ever actually aim for that, but I'm still going to try and improve and try and head towards that area, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, for me, it's just reading in areas I don't know about. And again, watching content and listening in areas I don't know about just to expand my vocabulary. I think reading is definitely my main big goal. It's just seriously reading into a lot of different areas and a lot of different topics, trying to get more knowledge about the culture and the food and various other topics as well. There's a lot of topics that I used to love when I was a kid. Like I used to be really interested in physics and chemistry and stuff like that. So I'd be really interested in going into that in Japanese. Yeah. So just basically,
Cool. Yeah. That sounds really good. I feel like that's kind of like where everyone should kind of hope to be, where you get to the point where you can get your stuff done, and then you just slowly keep building your skills pretty steady.
Yeah.
So cool. So now reflecting back on the process as a whole, like,
Oh,
what part of the process? Oh wait, do you have something?
yeah, I was just going to mention as well. At the moment, I'm redoing RTK to write by hand, so I can finally learn to write by hand.
Cool. Yeah, we've all been there. I've done RTK like 5 times. Probably will do it
Seriously.
again at some point. It's like
Oh,
you never really outgrow it in a way.
yeah, yeah.
But
But
so just to quote you here, you're saying you should definitely not do lazy kanji the first time. Actually, get that keyword on the front.
I was going to say, because it depends on what you want to do, whether you want to learn to write kanji by hand or not. But because, I say that, but my opinion changed. Like, I then ended up wanting to write by hand. So
yeah, well, it's not that you want to write by hand, but maybe that you want to be able to if you had to, right? Like the fact that you literally can't feels like a disability.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And I mean, I could write like basic kanji, like really simple stuff. But if I, anything beyond like heat and mizu would be like impossible. So it just wouldn't come to my head, and it would really annoy me. So yeah, as I say, like that sort of opinion has changed. And there's also the fact that I feel like I'll probably end up living over there for at least a few years. And if you're gonna live over there, you're gonna need to know how to write. Like,
yeah.
You could
Plus,
get away
I mean,
with
it's also just in general, you end up knowing them a lot better because, like, sometimes Japanese people will describe a kanji in parts first, right?
Yeah.
They're like, "Is it this
That's
kanji?"
true.
It's like, no, it's sakamuri with like blah blah blah, and you're not gonna be able to keep up with that if you.
Yeah,
don't
that's true. Actually, my girlfriend's done that a few times, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, and also, sometimes out of context, you'll just have a blank where you're like, wait, is this that one or that one? You can't remember the difference.
Yes.
And it's like just those little glitches, they start to get really annoying, and you just start to feel like you have a handicap.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think that should fix it as well. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So like looking back, like what part of the process was the most fun? And on the other side, did you ever go through like an intermediate blues or something like that?
I think the most fun part was probably between the 6th month and the sort of 1 year mark. That sort of area where, well, and a few months after that as well. It's sort of that area where you know enough. Like, you still know nothing, basically, but you know enough where you can get by, and you could learn a lot more from it. It's kind of like a snowball effect, like a snowball going down an avalanche. A snowball turning into an avalanche. You're sort of accumulating more as you progress. And that's sort of the feeling of when you hear like a new phrase, like, or you hear a complete sentence and you're like, oh my God, I understood that entire sentence. Like that sort of boost it was just great. Like, it was so good having that. And in fact, like, just that and all the small sort of mini goals I had where I'd be like reaching 1,000 sentences, reaching 2,000 sentences. And, I tried measuring my comprehension, like from like TV shows, by like working out how many sentences I knew per show and like dividing it by the time. Like, I did some weird shit, but trying to like measure your progress and see how much progress you like I was making. That was fun. Like, I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed looking at my stats and stuff, which isn't necessarily a good thing because you don't want to waste too much time doing that. But that was still fun.
Cool.
And
do you have any slumps or anything on their end of that?
Any slumps? Well, I was, as I said earlier, there was a phase where I had like a week where I was just like going crazy because I couldn't.
At the very beginning.
Yeah, at the very beginning. So I was like, why aren't I getting better? Yeah. But no, I mean, I had days here and there where I was like, man, I really suck. But then I would just look at the videos I'd made, or like I'd written diary entries as well. So I'd look back over those and sort of see, how far I'd come. Yeah, and I'd look at my progress ranking and stuff, and that would sort of reassure me. And if I had really bad days, then I would end up reading the AJAT site again just for a bit of motivation.
Cool. Yeah, I used to do that a lot too.
Yeah. There was also, I took I'm taking this piece of advice, which was go watch a show in another language. And I ended up watching some Korean show, and I was like, I don't understand a thing. I was like, I understand a bit more of Japanese, so that's good.
Yeah, that is really good advice.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, cool.
There were days that weren't great, but as long as you can sort of like get past that, you'll be fine. Yeah.
Awesome. So kind of to conclude, are there any mistakes you see beginners making a lot, or things you wish you would have done differently? You talked about how you wish you would have waited a little bit longer to output, but anything else?
I think don't read too much. Focus on listening. Like, listening is more important. Well, I say listening is more important, but like at the beginning, it's more important, right? Because if you read too much, we were talking about this in your interview, and you explained it really well, quite in depth. But if you do more reading than you do active listening, then you're going to fuck up like your accent and how you sound. You'll still get very good, I can imagine, but I wouldn't risk it. Make sure you get a good balance between the two.
What about Japanese subtitles?
Subtitles, use them at the beginning, but get off them quickly not quickly, but don't rely on them. Don't stick with them, because it is very easy to just end up reading them, right? And it's the same as having English subtitles. It's the same logic. Like, you're not learning how to listen to Japanese. You're not improving your listening abilities. You're improving your reading abilities. It doesn't matter which language you're doing it in. It doesn't matter if it's the same language that you're reading and listening to, and it doesn't help your listening. I feel like it might help your listening a bit, but it definitely doesn't help. It's definitely mainly your reading that you're improving. So don't trick yourself into thinking that you're listening when you're not.
I really agree with that.
Yeah. I think JP subs are a great resource, and I think they're good. And I use them a lot, as I say, because I use them as subs to SRS, but sort of try not to use them too much.
Yeah, gotta be wise about how you're using them.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's difficult as well, because like obviously a lot of Japanese TV has subtitles. Like, it's just part of the culture. Like, I never understood why they do it. I think it's probably to add emphasis and to like make things more funny.
Yeah, well, I think it's because a lot of those shows, they're assuming that the people watching them aren't going to be paying that much attention. They're like housewives watching the show like while they're cooking, and the sound's probably low and stuff. And so
I suppose, yeah.
So you can still follow along even when you're only watching it out of the corner of your eye and the sound might be off.
Yeah. There's that too. I always thought it was kind of like for the comedic effect as well, because like, I don't know if you ever watched PewDiePie, but I used to watch him a lot when I was younger. And his videos, whenever he was used to put subtitles on, and he would like, when a funny part would happen, it would be really big, like, and it would sort of, and I always used to find that quite funny. And I think that sort of adds to, but I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you hear Japanese people complaining about how Japanese TV is getting so dumbed down. Yeah. About how, like, if you used to watch comedy from the 80s and the 90s, it was like you had to know what was funny yourself. Like, you had to keep up. And if you were stupid, you wouldn't be able to follow along. But now they just spell it out for you so easily. I mean, it kind of seems like one of those things where old people are always complaining about how young people are stupid and it was better in their day. But
yeah. But for us, it's an issue because because I can sometimes end up finding myself reading it, and then I'll be like, hang on a minute.
Yeah, and there's the illusion that you're understanding more than you really are. So you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
Any other mistakes you see people making, or stuff that you wish you would have done differently?
Let's think. Spending too much time on Anki.
Oh yeah.
And I was definitely a culprit for this certain periods in my journey. So
what do you think is the ideal role of the SRS in the larger process? Like, how do you balance that properly?
So at the beginning, I think it's a great way of building that stepping stone into immersion. So it's a good way of sort of unlocking vocabulary if you want to go with that. And so it's a great way of sort of allowing you to notice stuff. So you start helping yourself to remember, like, or for example, remember words that you've noticed. And once you get to a decent level of fluency, or you get to like the point where you can understand a lot, all that stuff becomes pretty much useless because you don't need the SRS to remember anymore. It's really basic stuff. It's not sort of the really common stuff. So then the SRS is mainly for those rarer words that you don't see very often. That's pretty much my thought on it anyway. I don't know. Yeah,
definitely. No, I totally agree.
But so basically what you don't want to do is you don't want to spend too much time SRSing the easy stuff, because there's not really much point, because you're going to be seeing it every day anyway. There's a point where you could be SRSing too much and not gaining much out of it.
Yeah, well, your time would be better spent just watching a show.
Yeah. So I would say, like, don't SRS more than 2 hours a day maximum.
Cool, I don't know. Cool. Yeah, that sounds good.
What would you say? Like,
well, I'd say you got to kind of think of it in terms of a ratio with how much time you have total to spend on immersion. But I mean, I would say like if you have, for example, like 6 hours a day to spend on Japanese, like, you definitely don't want to spend more than like 2 hours. Yeah. Like, you want to spend at least like double that on just actively immersing, not even counting the passive immersion. So cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, any concluding remarks or anything? Where can people find you? I'm
not sure what my YouTube channel is. I think it's got a very weird link.
I'll link it.
But if you put BritVsJapan in YouTube, it'll come up. My website is matthewhawkins.co, not .com, .co. And that's just I just have a blog there, which I occasionally update and write posts about either my level or just thoughts about learning Japanese, things that I think could be helpful, and just advice here and there. I'm hoping to expand it a bit more and try and make it, try and do what you're doing and try to help more people, and yeah, sort of
cool.
Try and do that. So yeah,
awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on today. It was really fun talking to you.
Yeah, it was really good. Like, I had a great time. Like, it's amazing. Like, because we're like, I mean, I know you're so far ahead of me, but we're such on this, like, we're on the same level. Like, it's just like, yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, talking to someone, I can easily tell when someone's actually been through this process and had the experiences themselves. It's totally different than talking to someone who just read the site and hasn't actually done it yet. It's like you go through these experiences, and you learn things that you can only learn through going through each step one after the other.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like meta stuff that you pick up as well. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that you kind of can't communicate. The only way to get that is through having the
experience.
So.
Yeah.
Awesome. Maybe interview you again sometime.
Yeah.
A few years. Cool. Thanks a lot, man.
No worries. See you again.
Cool.
I'm terrible with outros.
Yeah, no, I am too. It's hard. But maybe,
it is hard. It's like, what do you say? Like,
how do you naturally, just like cut it off?